Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football, a fascinating SEC matchup. Vanderbilt heading on the road to play Kentucky. Now, you start with this Vanderbilt team coming off a massive win against Alabama. I got to give the Vanderbilt coaching staff, specifically on the offensive side of the football, just a ton of praise. I think Vanderbilt fans would be the first ones to admit this. Like, Vanderbilt doesn't have the athletes that a team like Alabama is going to have. And so you kind of know you have to rely on a little bit of scheme if you want to win those kind of football games. This Vanderbilt offense just completely outcoached, outschemed this Alabama defense. Like, whether they were going to that triple option, whether they were getting Diego Pavia outside the pocket, whether they were going to some of those mesh concepts to beat the man covers that Alabama was throwing, Alabama just did not have any answers in terms of the schematics of what Vanderbilt was trying to run on the offensive side of the football. Now, I think the fascinating conversation about this football game is now you have what I think is one of the better defensive minds in the country in Mark Stoops taking on this Vanderbilt offense. And this is not going to be a Vanderbilt offense that sneaks up on Coach Stoops. Like, he just watched Vanderbilt beat Alabama, completely whoop them, out scheme them on the offensive side of the football. You get the feeling that this Kentucky defense, they're going to be ready for what Vanderbilt is going to want to throw at them on the offensive side of the football. And you look at this Kentucky defense and say, it's been elite to start the 2024 year. Although it's been a roller coaster of a ride for Kentucky, this defense has been really, really damn good. 13 and a half points per game allowed. That's number 10 in the country. In my opinion, legitimate NFL talent at all three levels. And most importantly, this is consistently every single year one of the most well-coached defenses that we see. The chess match that we're going to see from Vanderbilt's offense and this Kentucky defense, I think it's going to be fascinating. Fired up to get into this one. Before we do, and as always, I think most importantly, let it fly in the comment section. I think there are a ton of different ways to view this football game, specifically from a Vanderbilt lens. You look at Vanderbilt and say, are you buying the stock? Are you buying that this Vanderbilt team can be really damn competitive every single week in the SEC after coming off what we just saw against Alabama? And I would remind everybody that, a couple weeks ago, we just saw Vanderbilt go on the road and take Missouri into overtime. Like, there's a lot of reason to believe that this Vanderbilt team is just not the Vanderbilt team that we are used to seeing in the SEC. Really excited to get into it. Let it fly in the comment section. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into this one. I think we got to start with this Vanderbilt offense going up against this Kentucky defense. Now, when you look at Vanderbilt, I think the book's kind of out on them. Like, you watch the film, you look at the numbers. They want to run the football a lot. They run the football 64% of the time. That's eighth most in the country. Now, they're not particularly successful at running the football, only 3.5 yards per carry. That's 98th in the country. But what they do a brilliant job of is building that passing attack off the run game. And so we're going to run the football in a lot of different ways. We're going to get a lot of different players incorporated in the rushing attack. But when we try to throw the football, we don't throw it that much. But when, but when Vanderbilt does, they are able to hit a lot of explosive plays. They're averaging 9.6 yards per pass attempt. That's top 10 in the country. And so we're not throwing the football a lot, but we're hitting explosives. And the two players that you got to know on this team is Diego Pavia at quarterback and Eli Stowers at tight end. Now, I think a lot of people are familiar with Diego Pavia, the amount of screen time he's gotten over the last 48 hours. The player that I want to talk about is Eli Stowers at tight end. They use this kid in so many different ways. They're going to move him around the formation. And from what I've seen from Eli, I think he's a legitimate NFL caliber tight end. He's a playmaker with the football in his hands. He's got extremely good hands when he's a pass catcher. That's where they want to run this passing offense through. You look, by far the most targeted pass catcher on this Vanderbilt offense is the tight end Eli Stowers. How does Kentucky try to deal with him? That's one of the big question marks. And you look at the two questions that I have in this football game is, one, can Vanderbilt have success running the football, right? They want to run the football a lot. Look at this Kentucky defense, 2.8 yards per rush allowed. That's top 10 in the country. I think it starts with guys like Deion Walker on the inside, but I think you got two all SEC caliber linebackers in Derek Jackson and Dumas Johnson. This is a very, very hard Kentucky front seven to run the football on. We saw them give Ole Miss a lot of problems running the football. We saw them give Georgia a lot of problems running the football. can Vanderbilt consistently run the football on this Kentucky front seven? That's the first question that we have to answer. And I think, secondly, can Vanderbilt out scheme Kentucky in the secondary? And this is a big question mark because they out schemed the heck out of Alabama on Saturday night. What intrigues me the most is I think there was an element of Alabama coming off that massive win against Georgia, not really taking Vanderbilt very serious. I don't know how much film they watched on Vanderbilt over the last couple of days leading into that game, because it just seemed like Alabama was really confused in terms of the concepts that Vanderbilt was running in the passing attack. Like, Alabama went to exclusively man coverage at points. Vanderbilt was running a lot of mesh concepts and getting guys some space. You look at Kentucky and say, one, I don't think Vanderbilt's going to sneak up on Kentucky, because Coach Stoops and this Kentucky team just watched Vanderbilt beat the number one team in the country. But more importantly, like, when is the last time we've seen a Mark Stoops secondary just come out and look completely ill prepared? This is a Kentucky team that, yeah, maybe can't always compete at the top of the SEC, although we've seen it before, but they never come out unprepared. And so I look at this matchup and say, you kind of have a feeling that Kentucky is going to be a little bit more ready for some of the concepts that we're going to see from Vanderbilt that Alabama just simply wasn't. And so I think there's reason to believe Kentucky can give Vanderbilt some problems on the offensive side of the football. Now you flip the sides and say, Kentucky on offense been a little bit of a roller coaster, right? I don't think they found necessarily their identity, how they want to run this offense with Brock Vandagriff at the helm. That being said, this Vanderbilt defense hasn't been that great. You look at the numbers from the Alabama game, Alabama was averaging 9 yards per play. Now, I give Vanderbilt all the credit in the world for making those game-changing plays that you need to make to beat the number one team in the country. You talk about strip sacks, you talk about picks, taking them back for scores. Vanderbilt was able to do that stuff. You look at Kentucky and say, is this the game we can see their offense maybe hit their stride? They've been struggling to run the football, even though they want to run the football. But I think more importantly, you probably want to go at this Vanderbilt secondary. And I think for Kentucky, nobody really talks about it. I think you got two of the better wide receivers in the SEC, and Dane Key and Barry and Brown. Specifically, Barry and Brown's athleticism, I think, could be huge in this football game. The team speed for Vanderbilt in the back end, it's not elite. Kentucky has one of the fastest wide receivers that we see in the country in Barry and Brown. Can you manufacture some touches for Barry and Brown in space and let him go make some explosive plays with that dynamic athleticism? That's probably what you're looking at first. But I think secondly, and probably the biggest storyline in this football game, can Vanderbilt manufacture some pass rush on Brock Vandagriff? When Brock's been clean, which has not been very often in this 2024 season, Brock's been, I think, a pretty solid quarterback. Like, we know he can make some big time throws. There was a reason that this kid was a 5-star quarterback coming out of high school. I don't think he's gotten a great opportunity to be very successful as a quarterback, because you go back to the game against South Carolina, Georgia, Ole Miss, Kentucky has had a really hard time blocking up pass rushes. Vanderbilt's pass rush is solid, but I don't think it's like Ole Miss or Georgia or South Carolina's. And so can Kentucky keep Brock Vandagriff clean and let him have a clean pocket and deliver some footballs down the field? Because I really do think Brock can do it if he's kept clean. Those are probably the two question marks you're looking at on that side of the football. Now, getting into the pick here, I don't think there's going to be a lot of people taking Kentucky in this football game to cover 14 points, especially with what you just saw from Vanderbilt against Alabama. Look, I don't think it was a total fluke. Now, am I picking Vanderbilt to beat Alabama 9 times out of 10? No, absolutely not. But we did also see this Vanderbilt team go on the road and give Missouri all they can handle. I think this Vanderbilt team can compete in the SEC. That being said, I'm going to go with Kentucky, and I'm going to take the points for really one reason. I think Kentucky takes this game really seriously. And I think Alabama kind of let Vanderbilt sneak up on them. Vanderbilt was able to make some plays to really change that football game. I look at Kentucky at home, coming off a bye, getting some guys back healthy, and say, I have a hard time seeing this Kentucky defense come out and look utterly confused like Alabama was. And I think, secondly, I think this Kentucky offense can do some things to put some points up on the board. This is not a very good Vanderbilt defense. This is a Kentucky offense that there are aspects of this offense that I really like. They haven't really been consistent in pass protection, which has led to them struggling on offense. I think they have a shot at blocking up Vanderbilt. And if they can do that, I think they can hit some explosive plays and put some points up on the board. I don't love it, but I'm gonna take Kentucky to cover the 14 points because I think this Kentucky team coming off a bye after seeing Vanderbilt just beat Alabama. I think they're going to be ready for this football game. So give me Kentucky covering the 14 points. I think this is a solid Kentucky team. I think this is a really solid Vanderbilt team too. If you would ask me if this game was going to be on one of my monitors on Saturday night 4 days ago, I probably would have said no. It's certainly going to, I mean, Diego Pavia is turning into must-watch television. Now, I think this is going to be a really fun game. Fired me up for this one. Give me Kentucky in the points. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. We'll talk to y'all later. Peace.